Hello, my name is Hamlet Dobbins, and this is Memphis Material, an oral history project chronicling the stories of the visual arts in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Material is a podcast celebrating the personal histories, the intimate stories, and the studio practices of some of the people who help shape the creative landscape of our city. These unedited interviews are all recorded at the Memphis Listening Lab, an archival gem located in the majestic Crosstown Concourse in beautiful Midtown Memphis. The website for Memphis Material was designed by the wonderful Brian Dixon. Now, we don't really have sponsors for this show, but if we pretended that we did, today's episode would be brought to you by encyclopedias, specifically the Encyclopedia Britannica. I am stunned that one of the common threads of this series of interviews has been the importance of encyclopedias. For sure, I remember when I was a kid and it was time to do a report on anything, I would walk a couple of houses down to Carrie and Carl Quick's place and I would borrow one of their encyclopedias. I also remember when I would go over there and spend time, every once in a while, I would just go and get a book at random and then just slowly flip through it. I don't know why I didn't really think about its importance in my life, but for sure, it is a thing that has come up again and again in this particular project. Now, today's interview is part one of three that I did with Tom Lee. It was recorded on April 26th, 2024. Enjoy the interview. 2024, and we're here with Tom Lee. And so, Tom, if it's cool with you, I'm just going to start the way I start with most folks, which is kind of a ripoff of Krista Tippett from the On Being podcast, where I say, she always asks, what's your earliest recollection of faith? Because her show's about faith, but mine's about art. So what about you? What's your earliest recollection of art?
Well, they could be the they could be the same thing.
Okay.
Actually, God, I hope I don't. Do we have like a real time limit on here? Because I tend to get carried away.
We do not. Okay,
Awesome.
that's another thing I need to tell you is that there's no rush.
Okay,
Now, when I was
good.
interviewing Beth was like, well, when I was a kid, I did this and this and this. And then she talked for about 5 minutes and then she said, and that leads me to what I'm doing today. And I was like, no way, Beth. Slow down. Take your time. There's no rush. And so every once in a while, I have to kind of rein somebody back and make sure that they're not zooming ahead too fast.
Yeah.
But no, we're in no rush. And then the little disc will hold 15 hours, and so we're not going to stay that long today, but we've got the room until 3. And so if we get until you're 18, that's
All
cool.
right.
We'll meet another time and we'll get the rest of it.
No, probably. It'll speed up as it goes along. I have two earlier one, and one of them is kind of related to faith, and I will say that one. Well, 3. When I was in the 3rd grade, I made a drawing that I remember in my head of this dog in a field of grass, and in my imagination it was awesome, especially all the mark making with the grass, and the dog was of course like Lassie, and I give this to my alleged girlfriend on the bus, and of course it. I don't know what happened to it, but the relationship did not work out. So I found out early on that's not, that's people don't. Well, it didn't work out.
Now, where was this that you were growing up on the bus?
I was born in Texas.
Okay.
I was actually born in Brownwood, Texas, which is southwest of Fort Worth, about an hour. I drove back there through last year because I hadn't been there since I was born. But my dad was in whatever they call it, preaching college. It's like a Baptist college there, Howard Payne. Not that Howard Payne, but I always thought that was funny too. Oh, I met you years ago. Anyway, but we moved around a lot. My dad was a Baptist minister, so we moved around like a lot. The shortest we ever were someplace was probably 6 months. We lived one place like 3 years when I was just before I graduated high school. My brother went to 12 different schools before he went to college. So there was but it was mostly in Texas around. So where that memory was from, was a little place called Loop, Loop, Texas, which is way up in the Panhandle. Not that far from Hobbs, New Mexico, if you know where that that is. Also in the middle of nowheres. My dad drove the school bus, and so I'm sure that's probably why I thought, I could put moves on this girl in like the third grade to do that. Parenthetically, I learned how to drive the school bus too. When all the kids were off of it, he would let me sit in his lap and steer the bus down the road.
Whoa.
And all that power.
Yeah.
And the illusion of it anyway. So anyway, that was the first one. So the girlfriend didn't work out, and it was this awesome drawing in my head. That's the earliest drawing that I remember ever doing. The next one was, and this is related to the faith thing. We would be subjected to going to revivals. And they were always these, over emotional, for me anyway, experiences that I didn't know what to do with, and I didn't know what to make out of. But at this one, my dad he could be really, really emotional. I only realized like last year that he's the one that taught me to be. To have feelings, about other people, that were, be nice to people and all that. I always thought, I don't know where it came from, but anyway, so at the end of his sermons, he would be crying his eyes out, for one reason or another, because he was just so wrapped up into it. But there was this one that this artist from some school showed up, and he's got this tripod that he puts up. Not like an easel, but more like, just three-legged, knock it down. And he puts this big wad of paper up there, and while my dad is preaching, he's doing this drawing, and they had the lights down and a spotlight on him. And he was using, the kind of colors that you're not supposed to use, purples and oranges. And so it was really dark and foreboding. Well, of course, it ends up being, the crucifixion. And it's very dramatic, and everybody's just like watching this guy like, what the hell? And my little sister, who is in the cult. she's the strongest cult member. She was just weeping. She was like, God, she had to be. See, I was in about the third or fourth grade. How old? I was 10. So she must have been about 5 or 6. And just weeping her eyes out. And then that's when she became, converted, as they say, because it scared the shit out of her, And I was moved by the whole thing, but I thought the whole performative aspect of it was something that I'd never seen before in public. I grew up watching John Nagy, learn how to draw with John Nagy, the beatnik artist that was on TV. He was the first art instructor on TV in the 50s. I could never draw the dolphin quite correctly, but he would go through these whole lessons, and it was all based on real classic drawing stuff. You learn how to draw the cube and the sphere and the cone and the cylinder, and then learn how to do perspective and all that. So I got a lot of that stuff like early on. So that's the end of that episode, because it didn't turn into anything else. But all these things kind of mixed together at that point. So at some point, I had seen these the ads for the I forget what it was called, American Art School or something, where you have the little sketch of the pirate.
Yeah.
It's either draw the pirate or the cowboy or the whatever.
Yeah.
So I did that and sent it off, and I'm still in about the 4th grade, and so I get the packet, and I'm going through this thing. Have you ever seen them?
No, I mean, I know those advertisements. There's like a turtle and some, like you were saying, some other things. But I don't think I've ever seen what comes in the mail once you send that off.
It's basically 2D design class, or whatever the foundation. It's like between that and drawing 1, except it's more exam based. Which of these designs with the circle and the square on it is more balanced.
Okay.
And so you guess about all this stuff. But it had a couple of fashion pages in it where it had these silhouettes of women on it, and so you were supposed to draw sketches on them or dresses on them or whatever, and they were just outlines, and probably a face on them, but that was it. And so I didn't get that booklet myself. My parents, got it in the mail and then gave it to me. So I get to that page, and it's all X'd out. Because they're naked.
Because your parents had edited it.
Yes.
Whoa.
Not just edited,
but just like removed it.
Yes,
or
censored it.
Or redacted it.
Yes, and not very well either. It was, it was more like this violent kind of slashing across this not real. So that had a real deep impression on me. The whole contradiction between what the drawing and what's real, and besides the whole sex, aspect of it. We also had a set of Encyclopedia Britannicas, and that would have been around 62, I think. That would have made me 10 years old. Huh. I'm still figuring out how to figure out how old I was at certain times. Anyway, so everybody looks up the pregnant thing to see what it looked like,
because it was that great see-through. Or was yours that way? Where it was like a kind of
it was a cutaway. There were pages in it that were see-through that were like the blood vessels and the fascia and all of that on the body, which I'd forgotten about that part.
Yeah.
But the one about the pregnant woman, it was a cutaway, and so it's just got the outline of her and then the baby in the belly and all that. And we couldn't see that because that had masking tape. On it.
Now, were there other things that had been redacted from this encyclopedia, or was it mostly just things of the body?
Well, they're the ones that I paid attention to. So
you weren't really looking for anything else.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for anything innocuous. I was looking for, how does life work and all of that. But it was funny. It looked like the tape had been peeled back before I got to it several times. So it was probably, we got to go back to that book. Get out the pea, honey, and put more tape on. God, I don't know how that was related to the other one, except back then illustrations were like real illustrations in a lot of books. There was a lot of handwork that was done because that was the way it was done. So, let me think.
Now, you were talking about your parents, obviously not wanting you to see certain things, but with art, was it something that was encouraged? Like, did you guys have art materials around the house?
Oh well, they let me have the John Nagy drawing kit,
Okay.
and I was very happy until my brother broke the charcoal stick, and I thought it was ruined. Um, I liked the pristine set at the time,
Right.
but so it's weird. They would encourage that, I guess. I mean, that's kind of encourage. I mean, even letting me order this thing, but then you know hacking away at the parts I didn't like. I guess that was some kind of thing. My dad would sit while I would watch the drawing show sometime, and offer sometimes conflicting advice with the instructor. He showed me how to draw a duck. He said he was awesome at drawing ducks. He was not awesome at drawing ducks. He just wanted to, be in on the on the action.
Well, it's funny. When I was a kid, my dad always watched sports. And so, of course, there's like a lot of armchair quarterbacking. And my dad would armchair quarterback Bob Ross. And he
Oh,
would be
that's
like,
fun.
oh, that's not a good place for a tree. That's not, I would definitely not put a tree there. And then he'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. That's a pretty good place for a tree. Yeah, all right, that does work. Okay, oh, no mountain there. Do not do a mountain there. And then he'd be like, yeah, that looks pretty good. But it would be this like gradual acceptance of what it was Bob Ross had done. Yeah. Okay.
That's
And,
funny.
and so you were talking about how your dad would do these sermons and how there would be someone there making live art in the process. Was there other art like around the house, like in terms of maybe some of the things that have been made at some of these, mostly like religious things?
No. All the and that's the only one that I remember. And it was all, he could have worked on several drawings that were like tearaways. He would do one as the story progressed and tear it off because he was really really fast. I mean, it was all pastel drawings, and probably as impermanent as whatever example you want from religion that will be shocking.
Right.
So, yeah, we didn't have. Um, I have the only real art that I ever think that we had, and they got it from a neighbor of ours, and on the back of it you can tell that it used to be. It's like a press board like masonite, but it had a tile pattern in it, yellow tile pattern with white stripes across. So she used that, whoever this woman was that gave it to us, she did a painting on the front of that and framed it. But it was not a flat painting. It had relief aspects to it. So it's this cottage that's badly painted, and across the front of that, in perspective, in little bitty rocks, is a fence that she built. And then it's got a little pond in it with these kind of relief-looking ducks hanging off. And then it's got a frame with all these little relief or impasto-looking tree leaves and seed pods that are on it. It's really really weird, but I will die before I give it up.
So you still have it, or
Oh, yeah.
you somehow
Oh, yeah.
managed to hang
Yeah.
on to it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. If I remember, well, I'll take a picture of it
Okay.
and send it to you.
That sounds good. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had this in the house.
Yeah.
And then what
And,
about?
and it's straight up, untrained, as bad as it gets. But it's so, it's one of those things that's so fucking hideous that it's just amazing. And then, thinking later on, well, this is people make fun of that kind of art, and I've, been known to disparage it myself. But there's something about the human will to image whatever is in your head or in your heart or in your body, no matter what it looks like. And then sometimes, there are other people that are smart enough to realize that, oh, that's something, or that could be something.
Now, what about, were you exposed to other art when you were a kid? Like, were there, I mean, I know in Fort Worth, I mean, Texas is kind of famous for art, but I would imagine that some areas outside of those main areas would be.
No, never went to a museum. We never, well, we were in Dallas a couple of times. I had relatives that lived there, but we would never do cultural things at all. I'm trying to make sure that's correct. I'm pretty sure that I never went to a museum until I left home, and probably even only when I went to college, and then probably only after I decided to be an art major instead of a music major.
Now, when you were in school, I mean, you were talking about your brother moving around, probably being at 12 different schools. What was there art in the classroom?
Man, that's a hard one there was no art hanging in the classroom.
Right.
I remember in the 4th grade, also at Loop, we had a substitute teacher that, looking back on it, she must have been, I don't know, 23, 24 years old, and she showed us how to draw a cat. First to draw the, resting bean shape.
Right.
And then you draw a circle up on one end, and then you connect it with the neck, and then this is the way you draw the legs, and then...
I've never heard that expression, the resting bean. That's such a great...
It just occurred to me that that's what it was. Yeah, that's how she drew it, and I was even fascinated by that. Yeah, she's probably really old now, isn't she?
Yeah, probably. So now, what about? So I mean, one question, just thinking about you as a kid, what were your activities like? What kind of things were you doing? What kind of things were you interested in?
Oh, before I do that, let me finish the other part.
Do it.
So when I was in the 6th grade, our biology teacher, who was the coach, who was not even then I could tell he wasn't the brightest bulb, but his classes consisted of him taking his notebook, hand-drawn and handwritten, and reproducing that on the chalkboard, and we had to make a copy of it. That's what his lectures were, and so we all ended up with these notebooks full of these drawings of insects or whatever. And I saw his one time, and it was a little piece of something, but that's the art that I saw, was using this one thing to do this other thing, to realize this third thing of ingesting the world through mark making and image making and all of that.
Now, for me, one thing that's really interesting about that is that here we are in 2024, and you're processing it in that way. I mean, to me, that's really interesting. I mean, I'm sure that when you were a wee kid there in Loop, Texas, that you weren't thinking about, like, well, here was this one image, and then there was another image, and then we made a copy of this image. And so, like, how is that? Yeah. I mean, it sounds like that might have been something that was a presence in your... You know how, like, when you do your MFA or whatever, you have to, like, write a thesis or whatever. Like, for me, it was about Legos. Yeah. And it sounds like that might have been something that you have really processed and really thought about. What do you think that... How does that tie in?
Fuck, I don't know. I wish I would have been smart enough, in the 6th grade to realize that, and it is through that. But it's not. It wasn't even grad school. I wasn't even that smart in grad school, or that. I was doing really stupid shit. It wasn't until I had taught for over a decade that I was, really able to look at things, beyond a year or two and go, oh, I could look at that like this instead, or I could look at that like that, or I can make meaning out of something that probably didn't have any meaning at all, just by looking at it in a different way.
Oh, that's interesting. And so So you've got these like third generation drawings, and so what else was going on like when you were a kid? Like what were your activities? What were things that were interesting to you?
Well, I got everything out of books. So besides the pornography that was in a Britannica, we also had this other set which could have been Funk and Wagnall or something. They were these dark covers, and they had the most amazing drawing. It was part fiction, German folk stories with all this kind of scary imagery. I remember the wolves mostly. And there were probably prints actually, woodcuts.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Well, it doesn't matter. Where was I going with that?
Well, you were talking about you were talking about most of the stuff that you were doing as a kid was sort of.
Oh
it was through books.
Yeah. So another part of that book was the thing about projects that boys can work on. Bill fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
And there were lots of those in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of like popular mechanics and popular science and all of that. So the first wound that I gave myself was with my dad's handsaw trying to cut a board to make a boat that was stack laminated. And, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew there was a saw involved, and then suddenly I'm bleeding out of my knee. So
that was the first sculpture wound.
Yeah, that was the first failed sculpture work. Or it could have been, maybe it wasn't a failure. Maybe it was.
Yeah, there was a good story in there at least. Yeah. Okay, and so you were building stuff. I mean, I like this idea that when you were talking about how things are sort of processed through the books, and then also, of course, thinking about the difference between now and then, and thinking about how a lot of that material would come to you in terms of like encyclopedias or how-to manuals. Was your dad involved in some of that stuff with you, or was it mostly kind of you doing stuff on your own?
It was me on my own doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My brother was 5 years older.
Okay.
And then I had an older sister, almost 2 years older, and then I have three younger sisters.
Wow, that's a lot.
Well, I could tell you a lot more about how much more it is later, if it comes up. That was my immediate family. Okay. So I was the monkey in the middle, and so they made all their mistakes with my older brother. They accepted the sister after him as making up for all those mistakes. And then they decided they could ignore the rest of us that came along. So I was the first one to be ignored. And so, I spent a lot of time, by myself. My three younger ones, somehow they became a little club, and they still are. They're the Three Sisters clubs, and totally ignore everybody else in the family. So it's a lot of weird dynamics going on there, I think.
And so you were sort of left on your own to explore and mess around? No, you were talking about having the saw and other materials. Was that something that was normal at the house for you guys to have a lot of tools and stuff?
Well, I don't know where I found the saw. And the board had probably seen a previous life on several occasions. I found it somewhere. I don't know. We always lived next to the church building, and the one that we were living at that point, it had a lot of work done on it, off and on, and people just leave stuff around for you to find.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, of course, that makes me think, in the same way that we were talking about like 2024, Tom, thinking about the third generation drawings. Here we are sort of now, and then thinking about the kind of work that you make in terms of the materials that are at hand and what's possible. What about were there other kids around who were making things? Like, how did you, aside from these manuals, were there examples of other people doing things?
Yeah, no, not while we lived there. Um, but when we moved close to Houston, we lived outside of Conroe when I was in junior high. I was in the seventh grade, I think. And well, it was a little town outside of Conroe called Grangerland. That's where we lived, and we'd ride the bus into Conroe. Um, and there was this kid on the bus. I never met him, but the other guys on the bus talked about how awesome he was because he made his own model cars out of mud. And I think they meant literally out of mud. You know, this poor kid from out in the boondocks. I never saw one, but it just fired my imagination up so much. You know, just information tucking it away.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was just kind of like a slight. You know, it's like this kid's so poor he has to make things out of dirt.
Yeah.
But then again,
Yeah.
you're right. That is a
Yeah.
really strange, interesting mental image. And so, it's so thinking about like building things out of mud. What kind of things were you building? I mean, you were talking about cutting on this board and trying to make a boat. What were some other things that you were interested in building when you were a
God.
kid?
I can't remember anything that I actually made that could be a thing. I made a little wooden cannon at one point, and almost blew my leg off. But that's a different kind of story. But the thing about the kid on the bus making the mud things, that when I was in grad school, I started out being a sculpture major because that's what I was accepted as. I was doing a lot of chainsaw, figurative kind of carving, and not really, well, more or less, you know, kind of an acceptable way to do that. So I had this real falling out with my instructor, though, because I hated him because he was a fucking asshole, and he wanted me to, you know, take charge of his class so he wouldn't have to teach. You know, grad school. Who does that? Who gives a grad student their class and says, "I'm going to go do stuff while you know, that's I didn't know the way the world worked then at all. So anyway, we had a falling out, and the ceramics guy, Rondell, it was his first year to be teaching at Ole Miss. I don't know if you know him or he's pretty he could have been me in another life. We have a lot of similarities. So he was dumb enough that he said, "Oh, I'll take him on," and I was his first grad advisee. And he learned a lot, I think. Me, not so much. But so I did a lot of. I didn't know how to throw. I didn't want to learn how to throw. I didn't care about throwing at all. But man, slab building stuff was just, it was the shit. And so one of the things I did was made a series of cars out of mud. And I still have them, and I just think they're probably the only real good thing I ever made, because you know they came from a place of, you know, some kind of deep connection like that, and they're just these beat up kind of pretend hot rod things, and then a couple of cop cars that I really like. And do you know Obie Clark? He's a ceramics guy. He lives down in outside of Oxford, where people go to eat catfish. I can't think. Anyway, he's from Laurel, Mississippi originally, but he had told me the story about his interaction with the law at some point, and so I made a couple of cop cars for Obie, with the drug dog sticking his head out the window with the doped up look on its face and everything.
Okay, so you're moving around a lot when you're a kid, and then what was high school like in terms of, was there any art connection there in high school? I mean, usually that's sort of a thread that we hear.
Well, by the time I was in high school, my parents had decided that my sister just, younger than I was going to be the artist um, in the family. So she got all the emotional support, and the booklet that I ordered with the art. She actually got to take the art course. They said, "Of course you can have that, honey. You're so wonderful and everything." And Tom, he was just such an idiot, and he just wanted to look at the naked women in it. So she's still the artist of the family too. I mean, I love her, and we get along. It's almost like we're connected at the brain or something. She said we're like twins, and sometimes we are, but more or less like evil twins, I think.
Now, what's the
Sometimes.
age difference?
What?
What's the age difference?
She's maybe a year and a half younger than I am.
Oh, yeah, so just
yeah,
barely.
So yeah. So we're close. So.
Okay.
But there was no. I never felt like I was in competition. I felt like I had been crushed and defeated in my early enough years that what would be the point of making making the effort to, be involved in that. So I became a nerd in high school instead, and learned how to use a slide rule, and wore it around all the time, and loved math and science and all of that.
No, what was it, just out of curiosity, what was it about math and science that clicked for you?
Oh, the same thing that clicks with sculpture. The way I conceptualize it, it defines reality in a particular kind of way, and the way it constructs your reality, or that this room you can define it in mathematical terms. You can measure it. You can put those measurements down into different formula, and then somebody can look at it and go, "Oh, that's a room with a really kind of weird angle to it, like that." Not just the math, but I got interested in drafting when I was, what school was that? Must have been at Conroe. I took a drafting class from a guy who had worked for, or at least he said he had worked for the state of Texas highway department, and it was all hand drawing. So I know how to do drafting by hand, and I sadly subjected a lot of students to it, in 3D. No, you're going to learn how to use a compass, goddammit, because it's good for you. Well, you know what? It was good for them. They just didn't think that it was. Oh, jeez.
So you were super interested in science and math. Now, what was it about science? I mean, was it a particular field of study? I mean, aside from pregnant women.
No, it was more the idea that you can know stuff, and that you can know stuff, beyond just saying, "Oh, I believe in God," or there are angels, or things that not even necessarily concrete, but they give you a sense of a connection to the world in a more visceral way than faith can. Did that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then and so how did you make this shift from science to PS? I think that's kind of a common thing. I feel like a lot of when I taught at Rhodes, I remember a lot of the best drawers were the biology kids, or the best drawers were in some way connected to science or math. And so I don't know anything about brains, but I'm sure there's a part of the brain that's probably happy in the same way. And so how did you make that transition from the science and math into the visual arts?
Well, I sucked at playing piano.
But where was piano in all of that?
Oh man, this skips a lot of. I was in the military. I'm a veteran.
Wait.
Yeah, exactly. That's the reaction I have to myself when
What was that? Was that right after high school?
Yeah. High school was. I mean, it's weird for everybody. The weirdest thing about high school to me was the whole civics thing, which was taught by the basketball coach, who was a super misogynist, and you know, he loved the basketball girls. I think literally. You know, he was probably not a very good person. Um, but in the civics class, you know, it was all propaganda. We
Mm.
would It was before lunch, and they would show us, you know, the films of not just when they discovered the camps, but all the other, not just German atrocities that they could get films of, but especially the Japanese atrocities. We saw a lot of bayoneting going on,
Oh my God.
and you know, people being burned up, and yeah. Then you go to the lunchroom and go, yeah, I've lost my appetite, but yeah, it still sticks to me.
So,
So
so just a little bit in terms of chronology. Where are we in terms of time? When was this that you were in high
that
school?
would have been 1969. I graduated in 1970.
Okay.
So that would have been 69 before I moved. That was my junior year, so yeah, 69 would have been about right. And we were living in Dubuque, Louisiana, which is the home of the dog trot. Did you know that? Yeah, the architectural style.
Okay.
The dog trot. It's like two houses that are connected, and it's got a breezeway in between. It was invented there.
Okay.
Who would have known? They even have a dog trot museum there, and also it's the place that's the most well known speed trap in the United States. So I think the two are connected somehow, but I don't know uh, if that's true. Anyway, so I that was the longest we lived was in Dubuque. So that's why. Well, I don't know if that's true or not, but so that's the only place where I felt like I have friends, and I'm going to have friends, and then we're all going to go through life together, and then suddenly, you know, we move yet again. And but I only mention all the propaganda stuff because it impacts probably my experiences that I had when I went in the military right after high school. We My last semester, I was in Baskin, Louisiana, and I did make good friends there, even though it was a much shorter time. I think because we were all ready to, you know, not be in school anymore, and they're the ones that or a few of them were the ones that I kept up with more than anyone. But my brother came home once, and we had to share the bed yet again. And he's all he said was, "You need to get out of here. You need to leave home. I'm not telling you how to do it, but you know." And he had been in the Air Force for 4 years by then, I think, something like that. He's 5 years older, so yeah, he had been in 4 years already. And I didn't want to go. I mean, it was still, you know, a really bad era in Vietnam.
Right.
You know, listening to everything literally at the dinner table. You know, watching TV and all of that. Plus, you know, hearing about Janis Joplin dying, Jimi Hendrix dying, all of that from Uncle Walter. But anyway, so that's the only reason I really went in, was to take my brother's advice to get away from home, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, I thought I was probably really, really smart, and that something would just fall into my lap and be amazing. But then there was this whole 4-year period when I was in the military that everything that I thought I knew turned out to not be true, and everything I wanted to be true was especially not true. You know, it was a really, really sucky time to be in the military, because there was absolutely no morale. Vietnam, and it drifted over into all around the world. I think there were so many drugs on the base, and so that's when I discovered, you know, being high every day was not a bad thing to do if you're working for Uncle Sam. But as a consequence, you know, you do your job, You don't learn everything that you're supposed to learn to do your job effectively. Plus, I probably took too many at one point and freaked out for the next 30 years. So, like literally, that's when I discovered panic attacks from having one bad trip. Plus, having to be in the military and being kind of fucked up in the head like that, and trying to manage to survive.
Now, when you were talking about high school, you were talking about seeing a lot of propaganda, seeing a lot of things from World War II and probably the Korean War as well. And then we make that shift into Vietnam. And so, I mean, that presence must have been massive. I mean, because if we're thinking about the United States, especially your age group, and then also that shift from regular news coverage that maybe would happen once a day via the newspaper to this constant presence on the television, I mean, that must have been a massive historical shift for you.
I really don't know. I'm still trying to remember a lot. There's still a lot that I just don't. I don't really care to remember until I remember it. But it was, it was like I wasn't any different than any other 18-year-old kid. Growing up in a church situation and having all that propaganda on top of the other propaganda. Oh, I'll tell a parenthetical story. I don't know how it relates, but it certainly will. When we were still at Tubac, we went to the Southern Baptist Convention that was in Dallas, and I rode there with my granddad and his evil second wife. God, what was her name? I don't know. Bertha. Her name was Bertha, and she was a daughter of the Revolution. She was a daughter of the Confederacy. She was the most racist grandma I think that there ever was, step grandmother, in the world. I liked my granddad okay, but he was very that way too. Anyway, so we go to the Southern Baptist Convention, and it's 1968. I don't remember what month it was, but there's an announcement in the middle of one of these big meetings, hundreds and hundreds of people in this auditorium. Robert Kennedy has been shot. And you know what people did? They applauded.
Whoa.
Yes. It was fucked up. It's really fucked up. Anyway, I don't know how that relates to the other, except it still colored my soon-to-be experience.
Yeah, just thinking about that time.
Yeah.
And what you were around.
Well, thinking about that, and being around, more. It was not a big school, and there were not a lot of educated people. Besides, I knew the teachers that I had were really, really smart because they had gone to college and they had thought about things. And even though they were on the kind of religious cult into things, they were not stupid people. And most of the people that I was in high school with were planning on going to college. I did not plan on going to college because I didn't even know why a person would go to college. So it still was a real class thing. I'm sure now it's even a real class thing. You either go to college and you become smart, or you do whatever, and then suddenly you're 65 years old going, what did I do with my life, and why does everybody hate me because I'm stupid or whatever. I don't know. I'm sure they're all brilliant people, but or not. I'm into this rambling thing again, so you can
Totally happy about that.
Okay.
Now, and so you are in the military, and you were talking about the being on the base and the amount of drugs that were there on the base. What was that? What was your job? What did you do?
Oh, I was a radio relay repairman. Can you imagine what that would even be?
Fixing lines and stuff? Working?
No, there were no lines. It was microwave communication. We would go out in the field and we would set up these microwave antennas, which were big kind of dish antennas. There was always a mark on the bar. You would have to climb up to adjust things. Don't put your head above here, or you will, like a microwave oven.
Whoa.
It's basically what they were, and the people were always joking about, yeah, I'm not having kids. I got too close today, and all of that. But I'd gone to electronic school in Biloxi after basic training, and I could never learn how to solder properly. Which, as it ended up, I never had to know how to solder because we didn't do any soldering or repair when I got to my job. Everything was on plug-in circuit boards, and the way we would repair things is pull a board out, put one in we knew was good, and see if it worked. And you would go. The drawers were full of these cards, and that's how we would do our job. So we really didn't have to know anything except how to pull a card out and put one in that we knew was good to make the radio work. But it was these radio stations, and this room, God, is at least twice as big as what the radio was that we worked inside.
Whoa.
And this would be the outside space of it. The inside, there was a little walkway, about 23, 24 inches wide down the middle, and it was only about 6 or 7 feet long. And you would be in there all day long with this amplifier that looked like a fire plug that had something like 15 gajillion volts going through it, with a little screen over it with a sign that said "Do not touch," or something like that. And I was always tempted to, well, you're not supposed to touch it. What happens if you touch it? I never did. But it was incredibly loud, and that was during the time where nobody said it would be a good thing if you wore earplugs. So, most of us had a lot of hearing loss because of that. Anyway, so we would go out on these maneuvers, and we would set up radio shots so that the people in charge could talk to each other, and then if we wanted to, we would be able to listen in. Mm-hmm. But amazingly, nobody wanted to hear what they were talking about because it was stupid. So we went several different places out west. We were on the north rim of the Grand Canyon one winter when it was cold as hell, setting up radio shots. Went to Utah once, and we got to be on top of, I don't know what mountain it would be, but the radio shot was outside of St. George, Utah. It was on a mountain there, and we were shooting down towards Salt Lake somewhere. I don't know, 100 miles away or something like that. Whatever the range would be when you're on top of a mountain. And it was everybody hated us because the rest of the people that were there had to be down in the valley where it was already hot, and we were up in this idyllic space, like the Swiss Alps or something. Wild turkey, deer around. So it was like almost not having a job at all for 2 weeks just doing that. But that's what I would do. I would work on the radios and just make sure that they worked for when they needed to work. But how much do I remember about that much. Zero.
And so all this time, of course, is like it's sort of during the worst part of the war, and you were saying that morale was really low, and you were in there for 4 years. That's a huge amount of time. Was that the normal enrollment period?
Yep. I was actually only in 3.5 because they had a 6-month early release program, and they volunteered me to go. I'd been in a little trouble.
Right.
The whole drug thing. They didn't put any of us in. We were never even arrested. They locked us down. Well, I should tell you this story. So we're getting ready to go on one of these. Are called TDYs, temporary duty assignments or something. And so we spend all week rolling joints, and we got like 2 paper bags, like from the supermarket, full of joints. And the same weekend, there was a guy that lived across the room from me. I live on the 2nd floor, and I don't have a roommate at that time. So this guy across from me, someone had broken into his room, and so the OSI had come over. That was the Office of Security Investigation. It was beyond the base cops. It was more like the FBI or whatever. And so they were chatting to him, and the guy's got a bag of pot sitting on the table. Well, they just look. They don't do anything. And then the next Monday, before we're supposed to go, 5:30 in the morning, all the doors get opened up and the lights get flicked on, and they say, don't go anywhere, don't go into the bathroom, and stay right where you are. This is an inspection. And they came through to find and they found all that work that we did, and they didn't find much in my room, but they found enough. But the funny thing is, they hit the top floor first to work their way down, I suppose, which was stupid because anyway, we could hear the toilets going off downstairs. Vigorously. So nobody on the bottom floor got busted. It was everybody on the top floor. But we weren't busted. They put us under, like house arrest, and we couldn't leave for a few days. And then all they did was take away our security clearances, and then they made us not go to our jobs. And then I had to cut the grass and tidy up things. And for like 6 months. And during that 6 months, I lost every bit of give a shit about anything that I had. So when they asked me to leave, 6 months early, I was happy as punch. But that's when they asked, because it was my fault. I had screwed all of that up. It wasn't their fault at all.
And so after the military, you end up going to college?
Oh no, there was a pause there too. So I get out and I don't know what to do. So toward the end, I decided it would probably be good to stop hanging around with people that were smoking pot every day, and were tripping, every weekend. And so I for my own mental health, because I was having flashbacks at the time, and so I met this other group of people who were really nerdy and a little bit older than me, but it helped kind of save my life actually. So 2 of them had made these contacts. They really liked music, and at the time I had a guitar. I played a little bit of guitar, but like everybody else in the world plays, badly and not well enough to actually do anything. But they had met this producer in Clovis, Texas, which was where the base was. Does Clovis, Texas music producer ring any bells for you? Okay. Buddy Holly.
Oh, okay.
That's where he recorded.
Huh.
And the producer, God, I used to know his name. Now I don't know his name. Anyway, these people met him, and he was past his career already, but they were planning on moving to Denver, and their plan was we're going to go to bars and listen to music, and then let this guy know if we find anything interesting. So that was the life plan. So they let me tag along with them because they felt sorry for me, I'm sure. That didn't work out either because there weren't very many good bands in Denver except, people who were already on a label and all of that. So I only lasted in Denver maybe 6 or 8 weeks. And then the parents of the guy who we were staying with decided it was time for Tom to not be in their house anymore, which I don't blame him. I couldn't find a job. I didn't have a car. I couldn't get around. I didn't know how to do anything. I'd had one job interview, and it was for soldering. The thing I was, utterly incompetent at. So I thought, God, I'm either going to have to learn how to solder, which I don't want to do, or I'm going to have to do something else. So my mom sent me $50 from, they were living in Ackerman, Mississippi.
Okay.
And I got a bus, and I came home after all that time, and ended up in Ackerman, just down the road from Starkville, and so didn't have a real good time being home again because they knew I had been through some experiences that were outside of their own life experiences, and they were partly kind of terrified of me, and they partly thought I was still, smoking pot all the time, and it was just kind of not right, and probably godless on top of that. And my dad hardly talked to me. My mom took care of me, but she's the one, I think, who probably said, you need to see if you can get in school in Starkville. And so that's how I ended up in college, was, eventually having to go back home and not knowing what to do, and then mom saying, go to college, that would be good for you. And so it was. So that's where I started. But I started as a music theory major because of all the singing that we had to do. We had our family had to sing in church. We had to get up in front of people, and because there were so many of us, we had all the parts covered. But we were not very good. I'll tell you that, because practice. What's practice? Going through it once ahead of time? No, we're not doing that. That's a waste of time. God will help us sing. God loves our voice. Why shouldn't everybody else? So I just kind of landed on music theory, which I loved the idea of, and I thought I could be pretty good at this. Well, I love the theory part because, it's a lot like math. It has a certain structure to it and a certain way that you can move through the way music is structured and well, all of that. And I still, love that whole aspect of it. But at the time, there were no, you couldn't make guitar your instrument because it was not the 90s yet in Mississippi. And so I had to learn how to play piano. And so I had a piano teacher. She was probably 3 or 4 years older than me, was all. And so it was torture. And I had to take voice lessons, and the voice teacher was teaching, operatic style singing, which was to go along with all the classical music that you had to learn to play on the piano anyway. I loved my theory teacher. I can't remember his name. He was one of those old guys that walked with a cane, always wore a suit, had a little red bow tie, and was just probably, gay. but was just amazing at doing his job. And he was a composer as well. He spent a couple of summers somewhere in Colorado with some Indian tribe, transcribing their music and then putting that into piano. So it was very, very percussive, very, very odd. And then I went to one of his students' recitals where she played this thing for him. But he couldn't find anybody to actually write the music down. So he heard that I was interested in art, and so I wrote some of the music down for him because, it's easy, little dots and lines and slashes and stuff like that.
I mean, you say it's easy. To me, it's like a magic power. I totally, my brain, I love music, but in terms of like if I had to say what it was or how it works or to know if it was a C or a B or anything like that, I would have no idea. But this was something that you had picked up along the way.
Yeah, just from, growing up in church and all the music every time. Most of it bad, but every now and then you would hear. Oh, you know what? When we were at Dubuque, we lived outside of Dubuque, actually, in the country. So it was a little country church called Fellowship Baptist Church, and it was across the street from the cemetery, and our house was across the street from the cemetery, which set up a whole other, kind of nightmare scenario for later on, thinking back on how weird things are. Yeah, Christianity really is about death, because there it is, right there. Anyway, my sister's buried there, so I can't make too much fun of that. But I remember, I got to tell you that one too. At this particular church, they brought in these college kids. Once that's where we also saw up with people. You remember that? Yeah, the feel good things, and they were a little too left wing radical for a Baptist church, but we got to see an early version of that anyway.
Wow.
I forget about that. Anyway, the other people we saw, it was these three college boys. That looked like, more like the 50s and the 60s with the suits and the short hair. And they were a trio, a guitar, a banjo, and a stand-up bass. So it was like the Kingston Trio. It was like big then.
Yeah.
And that just blew my mind because it was outside of my experience. I heard music on the radio and everything, but I'd never seen a band. I'd never seen people actually play music. And to know that sort of folk Christian music could sound that interesting, and good, it's like, wow, this is great. But then, the dad and then everybody else in church saying, no, we hate this kind of thing. These young guys are just, ruining the music, and they're all blah, 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 and why do they have to be smart? Why can't they be stupid like us? And there was a guy that was in college there that he was the big talk for a while because he had gone to college and he had read philosophy, and then he grew a beard and decided to stop going to church, and that was the most awful thing that they could hear of. So that was their view of what college was.
Well, I wonder why your mom was like, well, you should go to college. You should figure this stuff out.
It was long enough later, and I was ruined. I was one of them by then, and she just thought maybe, go into your own element there. You need to be with the wackos. Yeah.
But I imagine making that transition from the military and then kind of wandering a little bit and then suddenly finding yourself at one of the big institutions in Mississippi, that must have been a huge transition.
Yeah, I'm really good at ignoring a lot. It's like when I go to my doctor says, do you feel this, blah, blah, blah. And I say, you know, I'm so out of touch with my body. I don't know what you're even talking about. What's that even supposed to feel like when you have a broken arm or something? I could have one and not know it. You know, it's like between ignoring it and being ignorant about it. But that's I'm probably digressing now. Was that what that? Oh, here's the other thing, because that would have been that would have been around 68. So around 68 also, 68 or 69 was when well it was I don't remember what years the Freedom Riders were, but and it could have been on the tail end of that. But there was a certain period when there were at least around there black ministers who would try to go to white churches. Mm-hmm. There's a long tradition of white people going to black churches in the South because it's high entertainment for them. Mm-hmm. But to do it the other way around is verboten. And I remember, you know, this group of black men showing up outside the church and the deacons lining up and my dad lining up and not letting them come in. You know, there are some things that just make your brain explode, even at the time that says, yeah, this isn't right. I don't know why it's not right yet, but I'm going to figure this out, and it's just so. And I feel so lucky to have been seen something like that happen that was so profound that would never have been on. You know, nobody's going to cover that. Mm-hmm. Oh, a group of men try to go to church and they won't let them in. Well, there was no violence or anything involved in it, but yeah, it was messed up.
And so you were saying you didn't necessarily know why, but you knew it was messed up. And so, like, for the most part, I mean, you're talking about this time that's sort of a point where a lot of people who are your generation are coming to this kind of realization, and sometimes it's because they're now entering integrated schools, or now there's a different kind of experience in their lives. But for you, it was mostly a white area where you grew up, and then here the Freedom Riders kind of come in, and then you recognize this is sort of off. Now, when you got to Starkville, was that something that was a part of the conversation that was there?
You know, it was like night and day between 68 and 74. Mm-hmm. You know, half a decade had gone by, and a lot of bad shit had happened. So a lot of things had started changing by then. But the high school that I went to in Duboc didn't integrate until the year after I got out. So I was the last, class that was white people from there. So a lot of that was outside of my experience, interacting with not just African Americans, but even name it, Latinos, Japanese, any other kind of culture. We just didn't do that because I was never around that kind of thing. So whatever information or misinformation I had about other cultures and what they thought about, we got it through the church propaganda.
And so you're there in Starkville, and that's a huge school. And so you were in there for music theory. How did you get lured away from music into the crazy land of art?
Yeah. So I had this young girl teaching me piano, and so I had to learn this 1-minute Bach piece. It's something that he wrote for his children for bedtime, something in C major, and I can still hear it, and I could probably play my way through it. It's not really complex, he wrote it for his kids. He wasn't writing for a really refined audience or anything like that. So I learned how to play this thing. I put up with the voice stuff, and so I have to have a recital at the end of that semester. So by then I had met, there were a group of people in music theory that were amazing to me. They had skills. Some of them were in bands already, so they knew what they were doing. And we would be in piano lab, and before the lesson would start, there was all this. Everybody was just. Someone would start a riff and someone would pick up on it, and then the whole place is rocking. And then the teacher walks in and the fun is over, and then we have to do scales or whatever, or talk about scales. um, anyway, so I had to do this recital. So I'd met enough long hair people by that time. And I'd been living in the dorms long enough that I'd met other people. And I don't know if I'd met anybody from the art department yet. Surely I must have by then. But anyway, so I have to do this recital. So I had these pair of Levi's bell bottoms that I'd gotten before I got out of the military. I learned how to embroider because my mom at some point when I was in the service showed me how to use a sewing machine so I could alter my pants so that they weren't baggy. She taught me how to re-sew the inseams on your pants so that they're nice and slim and good looking and not ugly ass like an old man. And my shirts too. So I knew I became interested in sewing and that kind of thing. So embroidery, I'd embroidered this like long waterfall on one of my bell bottoms. And it wasn't very good, but it was it was not as good as your pants
Right.
that you have on, but it was not bad. And they were a little bit hip hugger also. So then I took a T-shirt and I cut it under my chest, and I made tails out of it. And then I took a paint marker and I drew like it was a tuxedo. Drew a bow tie on it and the buttons where the buttons were and a little here. And I also had I'd started letting my hair grow, and when I had hair, it was foofy. It was, So I had an afro. I could comb it out, wider than my shoulders and on top at the time, which is not at all. There's nothing on top now. But anyway, so I just felt. I felt like, if I'm going to have to do this recital, I'm going to do it my way. So that's what I wore. Wore the bell bottoms with this cutout. So my midriff is naked also. So I walk in to the recital room, and it's in the choir room. So there are all the bleachers and all the teachers are sitting. And I don't get into the room for like half a second, and the cackling starts. They're just amused, and my teacher's sitting here like this. She just put her hand over her face and for the entire time I'm there. So I go to the piano, I flip my little tails back and sit down, and I play, and then I get up and I bow and I leave, and they're still laughing. I don't think they heard anything. And I never went back. Then I walked over to the art department, right after that, and I said, "I'm home."
Wait, how did you? I mean, that's a great story. But how did you? What was going on in terms of? Was there a close connection between music and art, or was it just one of those things where you had seen those people around and they seemed more like your people?
I think probably that's it. But you know what? Probably the holdover from the competition with my sister to see who was going to be the artist in the family. I still had things that I felt like I wanted to find out how to do that way, and I didn't know what art was. I didn't know what to do with it. I just knew that I wanted to use my body in a different way, and I knew that I could never learn how to play piano to get any good at anything, much less composing music, which is what music theory leads you into. So I don't know, but the first drawing class, it was like, yeah.
Tell me about this drawing class.
Cliff Clifford, he used to teach there. Well, I'm not going to say that way. He ended up being a murder victim years later. I'd seen him off and on. I saw him the last time when I was in grad school, and we had a short conversation about seeing if I could have a show there. I reintroduced myself because he didn't know who the hell I was. I'd been to Montana and back by then, and so he said, I'll look at your work and everything, and you can have a show if I like it, but there better not be any of those goddamn snakes in it. Everybody's drawing goddamn snakes. Well, I was drawing goddamn snakes myself. Everything was snakes. So I don't know if he had been in my studio and was just fucking with me, or I suspect that's what it was. He was insane. He was the best first art teacher I could have had. He was, I think, really literally insane. He was so hyper all the time. There was a drawing class going on, and there was a shelf that needed to be moved at some point, and it was not his class. It was some other guy's class, Jan Weber's class, who was the first hippie artist that I ever knew. And he just walks in Jan's class with this sledgehammer and just starts wailing away on the shelf. And he could get away with things like that. He was the first person artist I knew that did carvings, that did wood carving also, and they were these creepy ass skulls with this other kind of imagery on it. They were supposed to be related to some kind of Roman something, I don't know. They were just odd, and he was odd, but he was in a bar one New Year's Eve, and there was some conversation about selling guns to these two young guys, and they followed him out of the bar and ended up murdering him and dumping his body in a dumpster. And it was really kind of shocking. But what was even more shocking was I didn't know his family at the time, but after I'd been teaching at the college, and this was pretty far on, we would do portfolio reviews, for accepting people every now and then, and his daughter shows up. And so we have this nice conversation about her dad and how I had known him and what I thought about him. But it made me feel not so, creeped out about, I don't know, life goes on and all that. Mm-hmm. She seemed like a really nice person.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was so great about the class? Like you were saying that he was probably certifiable.
He probably didn't do things he was supposed to do. He made comments that were really kind of smart-ass comments. I was drawing and feeling good about something. I don't know. Could have been working on a portrait, and he's yammering, and suddenly I start listening, and he's walking close to mine. He says, yeah, some people think that, they draw so well that they really think that God is reaching down and guiding their hand to make them draw beautifully like that. And then he's standing right next to me, and I'm going, how did he know that's what I was thinking? So that aspect of teaching that, so well now, having
right.
that experience. Being able to say the right thing at the right time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what kind of things were you doing in this class?
Oh, it was just, regular.
Regular drawing stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it was not a regular. No, our drawing program got to the point to where it was split between, drawing 1 and drawing 2. Drawing 1 being all line work, drawing 2 being value, and then, you might get to do self-portraiture in both of those, but it wasn't dealt with that way. It was in the service of learning, the qualities of line drawing and the qualities of value drawing and all of that bullshit. So it was a real and it wasn't a real art program at that time. It was very, very tiny at that time. We did have a figure drawing class, but it was against the law to have a nude model. So we drew the model in her bikini, which, thinking about that booklet, in the third grade and the X'd out bodies, and now here's this person who's supposed to be naked and she's not, and she's got this, it was much more provocative to me. Mm-hmm. It was, I thought it was the hottest thing I'd ever seen in my life, and here I am, not just getting to draw her. We did these drawings with paper and scissor, colored paper, where you couldn't draw it and then cut it out. The scissor had to be the marker that you use. Mm-hmm. Cutting out the shapes, recutting them to make them fit, and so it was a much more physical kind of approach to drawing that way. That was I liked that about his class that way too. It was a different way of thinking, beyond just marking with a marker.
Yeah, I like that. Now, for me, one of the wild things about going from high school to college was the kinds of things I was exposed to in terms of other people's ideas of art, or what art really was versus what I thought art was at the time. Mm. What kind of things do you remember seeing that were exciting for you at that time?
Well, since I didn't have an idea, what art was or was supposed to be, and starting off in Crazy Town, and with so many restrictions, or in such a department that was so underfunded and under everything, I had no expectations. What helped though was I left Starkville in '76 and moved to Montana, and finished my undergraduate at Montana State in Bozeman, which was a real fucking art department and had real artists there. John Buck was there, and Debbie Butterfield was there, and there were a couple of others, but now I suppose they're kind of insignificant. But I remember going there the first day, driving through and seeing if that's where I wanted to go to school, because my wife at the time, we had just wanted to get out of Mississippi. It was hot that summer, and we said, we need to not be here. We need to be somewhere cool. Where do you want to go? Montana sounds good. So we had both applied for Forest Service jobs, and she had gotten one. She had worked at Yellowstone for a couple of years, a couple of summers before that, and so had been up around Bozeman and knew what it was like. But we decided we needed to live a year there to get residency, so it wouldn't be so expensive going there. Mm-hmm. So, but I walked in to check out the department. First, it was gigantic. It was like a real studio. It must have been, well, I don't know what to compare it to. It was a lot bigger than the facilities at MC. Oh, the shop over at the college. Mm-hmm. That would be the size of just the sculpture studio. Mm. Yeah, the ceramic was probably 4 times that big. They had 2 ceramic teachers there, one who just taught throwing, one who just taught hand building, and all the boring stuff was upstairs. They had an adequate painting facility there, but it wasn't. There was nobody there that was teaching that was very interesting or exciting. Mm. Printmaking was on fire. Fran Noel was the the head printmaker, and he was on sabbatical or something for the time I was taking printmaking, so I had to take it from a grad student who was not interested or interesting, but looking back, I should have probably paid a lot more attention to. He taught litho, and to this day I can't stand litho just because of that class, because I didn't learn how to do it, and it was just, he was probably a grad student like me. He wants me to do what?
And so you were saying the printmaking program was on fire. What was it that made it so exciting? Was it just that they had a lot of good stuff?
Two guys, Bob DeWeese. Have you ever heard of him?
Mm-mm.
He's mentioned in The Art of Motorcycle Maintenance when the whoever the character is, he stops at this place outside of Bozeman, and what he does, he goes up to the DeWeese's houses, and they're artists who were active more in the 50s and 60s, and when I got up there. Bob DeWeese was really, really well-known printmaker. He was old school, used all the really bad chemical, smoked in the studio while he's working on, etching, puts his hands in the acid for doing all this, Of course, he died a horrible death, I'm sure, when he got older, but he looked old. He probably wasn't that old when I was there, but he looked really, really old. But anyway, he was doing amazing work. His wife Jenny taught painting, and she reminded me later after I got to know Vita some. They were kind of a similar personality and method of working and everything. So it was like super feel good. They were between the Beats and the hippies. They were a little bit more beat than hippie in their mode, but they were very, very loving family and did really a lot for the school, a lot more than the other people probably did. And then there was John Basher. I don't think he was very well known, but he was. You know what a Lazansky guy is? He was a Lazansky guy.
I am, of course, contractually obligated to mention that Lazansky was at the University of Iowa.
Of course he was. Yeah, sure. Well, he's the guy who brought printmaking to the U.S.
Right.
He's like the single-handedly the guy. So John Basher, I took classes from him. I loved him, but he was an asshole. I had him for a drawing class, too, and he goes on this rant one day about people should only do what they learn how to do in school. If you learn how to paint a certain way, that's how your work should be. And I thought, that is such a fucking lie. Are you fucking with me, or do you really mean it? And I assume he was being sincere, but I don't know. He was so much older than me, but I did really well in his class. I learned how to do relief prints, which is what he taught. I did a print every class I did. I mean, they were simple, but they were 18 by 24 prints that were done on tempered masonite. And I learned how to carve a plate really well and really fast because the classes were shorter there.
Yeah.
For that, and then how to print easily on a press. Anyway, I'll have to show you those sometime. It was a whole series of prints. This character I called Bart the transvestite pig. So it was a pig. His name was Bart. And he was a transvestite. And so the Ayatollah Khomeini was involved in one of the prints. Miss America was involved in one of the prints. It was crazy. Oh, Sigmund Freud tried to put Bart on the couch, to see what his problem was. They were kooky.
full disclosure, I don't have a lot of connections with Montana except for that school at Bozeman. And I know that that school at Bozeman is a particular locus for super weird artist. Like, I guess the person that maybe I know there that's connected is David Dunlap, who was there for a little bit.
He was the very first visiting artist I ever interacted with.
Really? Now, what do you remember about David?
Walking around with his jacket on, and he had these little bitty spiral notebooks, and he was doing these weird penis drawings in it. That's all he was doing at the time. Work about my father, I assume. I don't know if he was fucking with me either, but there were these little bitty books just full of these drawings, these obsessive little things, and I had no idea that I would grow up later and get to meet him and get to meet people who actually studied with him. Yeah, he was, it was the perfect first visiting artist to have because he was interesting, but he was also really mysterious. He looked like a normal guy, but I could tell he wasn't. I could tell he wasn't a Montana kind of person. He probably should have been from the Midwest somewhere. Mm-hmm. But he was already losing his hair by that time, I think. But yeah, quiet and reserved, and I thought, yeah, I could be a guy like that. That would be something to grow up into. That would have been. I started in '76, so around '76, '77 would be when I met him the first time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he's one of my heroes.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, I love David.
Yeah.
And so you were there in Montana. Now, what about some of the other teachers? And you were there for 2 years?
I was there for, I started in '76 and graduated in '80, so 4 years.
Wow, okay. So you sort of went through the whole program that way.
Well, they counted a lot of credits that they probably shouldn't have counted from Mississippi State. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I went through most things. I didn't have to retake 2D, which I probably should have. I didn't have to take 3D at all, which I never had, which I probably should have. And what else? And the rest of it was, yeah. I mean, I took the best drawing classes out there. I took there was a guy out there called Richard Helzer. I don't know if you know his name. He was they didn't call him metal people back then. They were jewelers, and he was doing stuff with plastics, and people were just hating it because it wasn't silver or gold or whatever. I liked him a lot, but I didn't get to take a class from him either. I had the grad student, and she hated me, and I hated her. She wanted me to go to class and work in class, and all I wanted to do was be in the welding area and make shit out of steel, and which I made one little piece out of brass to make her happy. So at the end, and she's her own work is like meticulous and stupid ass. She was making this water. I'm going to call it a canteen, although she didn't call it. She's making this little water canteen that was like a self-portrait. Mm. So it's like her face hammered into the silver that you put water in. Yeah, it was not good. She was not good, and so she told me at our last meeting that I had done not really well, but that she was going to do me a favor and give me a D. Instead of failing me so I could repeat the class, she just kind of, I mean, I didn't like it anyway, but for years after that, I hated metal. I hated metal workers. I hated everything about it because, I couldn't do it the way I wanted to do it. But I did meet, Joe Bova? Oh, he might have been at Miami, the other Ohio school. Is that
yeah. Mm-hmm. In Athens, Ohio, the three places that don't make any sense together. Yeah, Miami, Athens, Ohio.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I never met him. He was a friend of Rondell's, but his brother was in the metals program in grad school at Bozeman. So I've met his brother years and years ago, and he was doing funny shit. Oh, that was the other thing. It wasn't just that people were doing art there; they were trying things out that wouldn't be in Southern schools for 20 years or more. He had this whole system, this mechanical system, motorized, worked out, that he used these little chain drives, and it all involved unrolling a roll of toilet paper onto the floor. Stupid.
No,
People did a lot of stupid shit. I mean, stupid in a really, really good way.
in a great way.
Yeah.
So now
yeah.
you're talking about the people that you're there with. What about like in terms of seeing art outside of the normal stuff? The Monets and the Renoirs and stuff like that. Like, what kind of things were you seeing that were getting you excited and interested in art?
Well, not much, because Bozeman's in the middle of nowhere too. I mean, we would have shows. We'd have really good art shows. So I think that was this is how dumb I am, Hamlet. I was a year from graduating before I discovered that on the floor above us there was an art library. Like a library that had like art books in it that you could go sit and look at, and not have to go to the library.
So you weren't taking like art history classes or anything like that?
I was, but if they mentioned, oh, you might want to go find this in the art library, nobody said that. I never had to buy an art book while I was there. All the art history classes, they were lectures, and then you took the test, and then you were done with that.
Wow, so everything that you were being exposed to that was new and contemporary was the stuff that was happening around you.
No, actually, there were while I was there, I forget which year it was. There was a symposium that they had that there were a lot of connections with UC Davis because of Debbie Butterfield. That's where she did her undergraduate, I believe. So William Wegman shows up, and Lucas Samaras shows up from the East Coast, and Ivan Karp shows up with Lucas Samaras from New York, and all these other, what's his name? Tony Fox? Is that the video guy? It's either Tony Fox or Terry Fox. He was doing video stuff. He was really, really well known, and he may not have been from this country. He may have been Dutch or something like that. Anyway, a lot more conceptual work. So there was this like week-long symposium that they had from people from California, people from New York, and people did performances, and people talked about art. That was the biggest like week of my life in art school, was seeing real artists come and make real work right in front of us and talk about it. And it was I still can't believe it that all of this happened, and I was exposed to that, and I was like this dumbass from Texas that ran into that.
And so you were there at Bozeman, and they had this symposium, and I would imagine people from all over came. I mean, in addition to Wegman and Samaras. Yep. And so people from other institutions are also coming there probably for this symposium.
Oh yeah. They had, and they just had a really good visiting artist program too. They had money enough to bring people in, because people weren't. I think they didn't know any better at the university. I mean, the flagship University of Montana in Missoula always got much more attention, and I think that's why Bozeman was so good, is because they felt like they had, a lot to live up. Rudy Audio, ceramics guy. Yeah. He taught at Missoula. He came down a couple of times. He was an old guy. at that time. His wife was an artist too. I don't remember her name, but we had to suffer through her to get to him. But the thing about it was there just seemed to be all these really great connections between the faculty there and people in the real world, not just the academic world, but the high art world that at the time was really kind of unusual and was not something that you would see in the middle of the country. I mean, Chicago, you would see it because that's the first place I heard about the Harry Who. Also, they had a visiting art historian come, and sadly I signed up for it, and they spent the whole semester on the Harry Who, and I hated those fuckers.
What do you mean? How could you hate the Harry Who?
No, wait,
Okay.
wait, because I first of all, it's a stupid ass name, Harry Who. What the fuck is that? I hated this teacher. He was a short guy with who was bald, and he had this little scratchy beard. He was just not likable at the time. I was a lot younger. I'll go with that. So I suffered through this, and then at the end of it, we had to make this artwork, and so I make this little. I carve all these long kind of things that look like they have peanut. They're actually little like Loch Ness monster kind of things. There's like 6 or 7 of them, and I put them in this piece of cast plaster that I've made look like water. And so that was my response. Well, duh. I'm thinking it could be a Chicago piece of art. And I'm sure I was trying to be a smart ass about it, but again, looking back on it, I go, wow, that's pretty insightful, I think. Plus, what a combination of things that you did, not knowing how to make art at all, never making art before, and then you do this thing. That's not the Harry Who isn't bad. They've struck something in you that needed to be struck.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Westerman is my daddy. All those other people up there too. Even the nun who painted on plexiglass. What was her name? I think she did dots or something.
I don't know. I can't remember.
I just remember she was a nun and she painted on plexiglass.
Now, what was it about? I mean, this is one of those things where like I'll ask a question and it's one of those questions that's kind of like, well, duh, what's not to like? But like, every artist is almost like not a Rorschach's test, but we all have our own entryway through these people. Yeah. I like Westerman, you like Westerman, but what is it that what interested you or spoke to you particularly at that time?
Well, what upset me was this: we got to see a lot of West Coast artists, and the West Coast sensibility. You could say it's similar. It's a lot more similar to Chicago than it is to New York. The New York art scene and the West Coast art scene were nothing at all. Had nothing. And then you got Chicago in the middle doing weird shit that's like, partly fighting against one coast, partly fighting against another, and then kind of trying to find kind of some space in between there. But the thing I like about... Well, the thing that I came to love about Westerman in particular is the thing about knowing how to do something on one level that's considered to be a high craft and a production or a way of working that has absolutely doesn't always have something to do with the whole concept. He took two opposing things: a method of working that's supposed to be for one purpose, and he uses that method to smack up against ideas that have nothing to do with the way he's working at all. It's like he's a fucking carpenter. He's a really, really, really good fucking carpenter. But that was basically what his method was, but and I don't know how smart he was, and it doesn't really matter. He couldn't have been that smart, smoking all those cigars for all those years and walking around on his hands down the street in his white suit. What a God. He must have been some kind of. I would have loved to have met him, but I don't know if I would have liked him at all.
And was there, I think we all kind of have pieces that we think of as the favorite. Was there an early piece or a piece of Westerman's that you saw early on and you were just like, oh yeah, that's really fucking cool?
I don't know if it's a lot of them, but the God, what's it called? It's the one with the tire tracks across it, and that could have been something about like Lincoln Continental. It was kind of a joke, but more than that, the death ships, because they're just so. Even if you don't know anything about, World War II and what that came out of, the trauma that he went through to do that, just as objects, they vibrate in such a way when I look at them and think about them that they're these living objects of some kind of human something that it's just fucking mind blowing to me. They're living things, and it's just how do you even make something like that and pack all that into it, and then somebody look at it and go, yep. It's a mystery to me how that works.
And so you were looking at him and you were interested in him. Were there other artists that you were particularly drawn to at that time when you were in undergrad?
Well, he was pretty how could you look at him and then go, oh, there are other people in the world that are working?
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting, but this is like the shit right here. It's like I liked Arneson, the ceramic guy, but I liked him more for the humor, not so much that he was good or deep or insightful. He was, I don't know the right word. He was probably an asshole too. I mean, really good with clay and everything, and all the self-portraits where he was poking fun at himself, and just the technical ability to even make those things and have them, on that knife edge of something looking like something. They seemed a lot more academic to me than Westerman. Westerman was just fucking crazy world. This float, I'm gonna stick it on here. It's gonna be the eye of a blah 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 blah, and it's gonna work. And it does. I actually don't like all of its work. Like anybody in the world, you make stinkers or things that just don't, that you probably shouldn't have let them put in the museum to represent you. Yeah, I can't think of anybody else at the time. I mean, I'm sure there were. There was a guy who taught at North Texas State that was a visiting artist, and I tried to look him up, and I can't remember enough to do that. But he was doing what I think now is a shtick. He dressed up, had really long hair, and he dressed up in colorful kind of cowboy suits, and he called himself a shaman, and he made all these kind of doodah looking sculptures with details of shiny bits of bric-a-brac and stuff on it. He was mind-blowing. I just loved what he was doing. I did stuff in response to that, but it was because it was like the first time you hear really good rock and roll. I think, you go, wow, I wanna play some of that. or I want to hear some more of that.
Now, what kind of things were you making at the time? What kind of things were you? I mean, you were talking about making some pieces, ceramics, steel, things like that. What kind of stuff were you making at the time?
It was a range. The steel stuff was all, abstractions, which I wasn't interested in. It was all kind of geometry based, and I don't even know how to describe it. It was stupid. The last thing I did, though, because I couldn't figure out. There was I can't think of his name. There was a California artist that did a lot of welded steel work, and it was all really angular and geometric and really colorful. And I really loved the color on this kind of hard geometry that didn't, it kind of made fun of the whole thing, or it made something that looked so industrial, so much fun. I lusted after being the Suvero for a while too, but that takes a shitload of
It takes a lot of land,
money and everything.
Cranes, helpers,
everything, and then broken back at the end of it. But I didn't know. I remember having this conversation about abstraction too while I was welding with my teacher, who wanted to know if I understood it, and apparently I didn't. And it was a thing that I needed to understand in order to make welded sculptures that I knew what the hell I was doing. So at the last year I was there, they had a yearly contest. You could submit a model for a piece of sculpture to go on campus, and they would install it. And they didn't give a shit what it was. But it was so I got to do that my last year, and so it was this three-legged kind of tripod that went up to this diamond shape. So it's kind of a skewed perspective thing on the top, and then the three legs instead of four kind of would throw you off. And then it had this big frame, which was a window sticking up at the top of it. And then it had this abstracted figure, which was just kind of a spiral for the head, and then it came down and curled a different way. And it was Alice Through the Looking Glass, or something like that, or call it Through the Looking Glass. And there were these other kind of squiggle things that I was able to start thinking about it more pictorially instead of what the material should be doing in a more structural or geometry sense. So I had figured that out about that. And that last semester, I did a lot of work I made like 20 pieces, because I had discovered 1/4-inch round cold rolled steel, and you could get it in 20-foot lengths. And I started making drawings with them, drawings that were sculpture. So I would do these drawings of figures in the air and then combine them with others so I could have this kind of structural unit. Still really abstract, but you could tell they were kind of figurative work. And then I would paint them in bright colors and then photograph them in front of a black background. They would all flatten out and they would look like neon light.
Now, what about the people that you were around? Was it a strong community? Were there a lot of people there?
Yeah.
Were there other folks who were there with you that were important?
Yeah, but I don't remember who they were. Actually, that's not true. One semester there was an architecture student who took a class in sculpture, and I really liked him. His name is Brad Miller, and I looked him up a couple of years ago, and he has his own practice in Seattle still. He doesn't look the same. His hair was fire red when he was in school, but now he's like mostly no hair. But he did these real minimal architectural related sculptures that were kind of balanced. One of them was a roofline shape, but that was really asymmetrical, and then he balanced it somehow on a different kind of pole, and so it would move really slowly, and it was really elegant and beautiful, and but you know, he was in architecture. He wasn't in sculpture, so we didn't have a lot of really happy conversations about that. But he always made an impression on me. There were just so many sculpture students that came after me also that were just burning it up. We're trying to make a lot of work, and we're attempting to make, you know, work that was beyond their physical limitations, which is really good. I wish I could remember her name. There was this one girl, and she brought in these two. They weren't fat telephone poles, but they were like telephone poles. They were at least like 6 inches, and they were. See, the ceiling in there must have been 20 feet, and they were almost that tall. And she used them like legs. And on the top, she made this short skirt that went around them, that undulated. I can hardly, oh God. It's almost the best thing I've ever seen in my life for a piece of sculpture, because it was so absurd and so dirty, you know, lurking up the skirt like that, and it's just 2 sticks and a piece of fabric up there, and your mind is just going. And she was so fucking cute too, and just, you know, God, there were so many people who were doing. I mean, they were doing things for class, but still, some of them, you know, were going the extra mile. And I may have to mention Clarice. I met Clarice Dreyer.
Okay.
Do you know her name? Well, she ended up. We did a lot of aluminum casting, sand casting, which we had a sand pit in the floor, and you would take 2 2x4s, and you would fill between the 2x4s with sand and level it off. And then you would take objects and press them into the sand, and then you would melt metal and then pour it directly into the mold. It's a very direct way of working. Well, she developed this process where she would take these vines, like grapevines and other things, and she would make these long parts, and then she would bolt them all together into imagery. You know, chairs and wagons and all this crazy ass shit. And we were in school together, and she's still, I think she's painting now, but she had work in Chattanooga one year. I tried to meet her down there, but it didn't work out. She was making all these God, what are they called? Like water fountains that were like for birds. But just so much bric-a-brac on it, and all of it just made the same way, you know, because you're not going to get a clean casting when you get that, and there's going to be a lot of residue, but it's got all this textural character to it that's just amazing. She was, when I was in grad school, I talked Ron into having her come down for a month, and so she did a lot of casting down there, and on a walk to campus one day, she found a dead baby squirrel, about small enough to fit in your palm, just weird, in the middle of the sidewalk, and so she fabricates this as part of this piece. She did all these long castings, you know, 10 or 12 feet, and then they got shorter and shorter, so she could build this kind of pyramid shape out of the cast aluminum kind of grapevine that she found, you know, around campus somewhere. And then she built this nest, this spiky nest out of all these whatever spiky plant that there is, and then this baby squirrel right in the middle of this spiky nest, in the middle of this big pyramid that she made. It was, I don't know why I mentioned her, except I really love her. She was older. She was about 10 years older than me, and she just quiet and serene, and you know, she'd think, I'm going to do this, and then she would figure out a way to do that.
That's great. That's a perfect place to stop. We'll pause there since we're about to kick us out. Thank you, Tom.
Already.
And that was the first of 3 interviews that I recorded with Tom Lee. The interview from today was recorded on April 26th, 2024. Please come back next week when we will have part 2 of 3 interviews with Tom Lee.